The Unsent Legacy, A Mother's Final Confession. Chapter 1. The Weight of Unsent Years. The old Victorian home in Concord, Massachusetts, stood like a silent sentinel, its clapboard siding weathered by a century of New England seasons, its windows reflecting the stoic, ancient oaks that guarded its perimeter. For Eleanor Vance, now approaching her late 60s, this house was more than just bricks and mortar. It was a living repository of memories, a vast, echoing space filled with the presence of her mother, Lillian. 10 years. A decade had passed since the abrupt, disorienting phone call that had delivered the news of Lillian's sudden passing. A heart attack, swift and unexpected, had stolen her mother away, leaving behind a void that no amount of time, no measure of Eleanor's own bustling life at Pinecroft, that quiet sanctuary in the Catskills where she had unraveled so many other profound mysteries, could truly fill. Lillian, a woman of formidable intellect, quiet strength, and an almost impenetrable reserve, had been Eleanor's anchor, her primary confidant, the unspoken bedrock of her existence. Her absence was a constant, subtle ache, a phantom limb of her soul. Eleanor had recently navigated a complex web of family secrets, the Chronos lens, the mystery of the swapped children of Pinecroft, the unsettling discovery of her own son Mark's spectral communications. She had even, against all odds, rekindled a quiet, profound connection with her first love, David Sterling. These journeys, while illuminating, had also been profoundly exhausting, leaving her with a renewed appreciation for the mundane rhythms of life, for predictable quiet. Yet the one unresolved piece, the raw edge that time had yet to smooth, remained her mother's sudden departure. The words unsaid, the conversations tragically unfinished, the final goodbye that never came. Now, the house, too large for Eleanor to maintain, was slated for sale. It was a wrenching decision, one she had postponed for years, but practicalities could no longer be ignored. Clara, Eleanor's meticulous daughter, had offered to fly up and help with the monumental task of clearing out decades of accumulated life. But Eleanor had gently, firmly declined. This was a solitary pilgrimage, a final, intimate farewell to the woman who had shaped her, a sacred duty she felt compelled to undertake alone. She needed to sift through the tangible remnants of Lillian's life, hoping to find not just objects, but echoes, answers, a sense of closure. Days bled into weeks. Eleanor moved through the rooms with a reverent slowness, a ghost among the familiar objects. Each piece held a story. The faded oriental rug in the living room where she had played as a child, the grand piano, its keys now silent, where Lillian had taught her the rudiments of classical music, the sprawling library, filled with volumes on history, literature, and the intricate art of diplomacy, reflecting Lillian's own passions. The subtle scent of her mother's lavender sachets still lingered in the linen closet, a comforting yet heartbreaking reminder. Lillian's favorite armchair, a smaller, less imposing version of Eleanor's own beloved Pinecroft fixture, sat by the sunroom window, a half-finished crossword puzzle, still resting on its side table, its neat, elegant script a silent testament to Lillian's sharp, enduring mind. It was here that Lillian had spent countless quiet hours, immersed in thought, in reflection, in the quiet pursuit of intellectual engagement. Eleanor found herself drawn, time and again, to her mother's old writing desk in the sunroom. It was a beautiful antique piece, crafted from dark, gleaming mahogany, with numerous small drawers, intricate carvings, and, as Eleanor knew from her own long experience with old furniture, undoubtedly a few hidden compartments. Lillian had cherished this desk, spent hours here composing correspondence, organizing her thoughts, shaping her careful, precise prose. Eleanor had always pictured her mother at this very spot, poised, eloquent, a pen dancing across thick parchment, writing long, elegant letters to friends, colleagues, or perhaps to herself. She began her methodical search of the desk. She opened each drawer one by one, methodically, respectfully. Old bills, meticulously sorted by date. Dried flower petals, pressed flat between the pages of an antique book. Stacks of neatly organized stationery, each sheet perfectly aligned. A small, elegant silver thimble, a relic from Lillian's brief foray into needlepoint. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing to suggest a profound hidden secret. Just the everyday detritus of a life lived with order and precision. Eleanor ran her hand along the back of the largest drawer, feeling for any subtle give, any unusual texture, any secret catches. It was a habit she had developed, an almost instinctive response, after her astonishing discoveries at Pinecroft, the Chronos lens, the midwife's journal, Mark's diary. Old homes, she had learned, were rarely as transparent as they seemed. Her fingers brushed against something. A small, almost invisible spring-loaded latch, tucked deep into the rear of the drawer, obscured by a false bottom. With a gentle click, almost imperceptible, a narrow, shallow space behind the main drawer slid open, revealing a small, dark recess, a compartment clearly designed for concealment. Her heart gave a curious, sudden lurch. This was it. This was something significant. Inside, nestled within the dim confines of the hidden space, lay a single, ivory envelope. It was thick, substantial, slightly yellowed with age, its edges softened by time. The paper felt fine, luxurious, unlike any standard stationery, and addressed on its front, in her mother's elegant, distinctive hand, a hand she knew better than her own. A script imbued with Lillian's unique personality were the words, "To my dearest Eleanor." Eleanor's breath hitched in her throat. Her heart began to pound, a frantic, almost painful drum in her chest, echoing in the quiet sunroom. This was not a bill. This was not a casual note, a grocery list, or a reminder. This was something profound, something deeply personal, something hidden. The envelope was unsealed, but not by opening. It was simply not postmarked. It had never been sent. It had been written for her, intended for her, but never delivered. Her hands trembled uncontrollably as she carefully, reverently, slipped the single thick sheet of paper from within the envelope. It was an aerogram, the kind of paper used for international correspondence, thin yet strong, designed to be folded and sealed without an additional envelope. The date at the top, in precise, unyielding ink, struck her like a physical blow. April 15th, 2015. Just 3 weeks before Lillian's death. 3 weeks. Eleanor unfolded the paper. The first line was written in a slightly shakier hand than usual. The ink perhaps a shade lighter, as if her mother had hesitated, taken a breath, or found herself fighting against a tremor before beginning. My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. I know this will be a shock. I have something important to tell you. Something I should have told you long ago, but fear held me back. Now, there is no more time for fear. Eleanor gasped, a guttural sound of shock and overwhelming grief that reverberated through the silent room. Her mother had known. Lillian had known her time was short. This was not a sudden, unexpected departure, a cruel twist of fate. This was a premonition. A secret kept, a conversation anticipated, a final message meticulously prepared, a last testament left for Eleanor to find. 10 years after her mother's death, the echo of absence was about to be filled not with silence, but with the profound, unsettling weight of an unsent legacy. A truth Lillian had carried alone for decades, a final, courageous confession waiting for its moment to be heard. The weight of unsent years crashed down upon her, revealing a hidden landscape she was only just beginning to perceive. Chapter 2. The Truths Unveiled. Eleanor sank onto her mother's favorite armchair, the thin, airmail paper feeling heavy, almost burning in her hands. The sunroom, usually a haven of light and warmth, now felt permeated by a cold, almost ghostly aura, the silence thick with unspoken words. Her mother, Lillian, had indeed known. She had known her death was imminent. This was not merely a letter. It was a carefully composed confession, a last will of the heart, a final testament to a life she had kept meticulously private, even from her own daughter. Eleanor took a series of deep, ragged breaths, trying to steady her trembling hands, to calm the frantic beating of her heart. She lifted the aerogram again, her eyes blurring with unshed tears, and continued to read. The letter was long, far longer than she had anticipated, meticulously detailed, written with Lillian's characteristic precision. Yet it was also imbued with a raw, aching vulnerability, a fragile honesty Eleanor had rarely, if ever, seen in her stoic, reserved mother. Lillian explained, in clinical but profoundly emotional terms, that she had been diagnosed with an aggressive, fast-acting form of pancreatic cancer months prior. The prognosis had been grim, the progression rapid. She had made the conscious, agonizing choice to keep her illness a profound secret, to spare Eleanor and the rest of the family the prolonged anguish of a drawn-out illness, the slow, painful decline. She had wanted to preserve the image of her strength, her quiet dignity, her unwavering control, until the very end. "I did not want to burden you, my dear," Lillian had written, her elegant script a little more forceful now, as if emphasizing a deeply held conviction. "I saw the strain in your own life, Eleanor, the way you cared for your own family, for Clara and Mark, and for Pinecroft. I saw the energy you poured into your scholarly pursuits, your tireless dedication to truth. I could not bring myself to add another sorrow to your plate, to watch you worry and grieve before my time had truly come. Forgive me for this deception, Eleanor. It was born of love, however misguided you may now judge it to be. It was the only way I knew how to protect you, in my own way, to spare you what I could." Eleanor choked back a sob, a profound mix of grief and a strange, aching understanding. Her mother, always the protector, always self-sacrificing, had carried this immense burden, this terminal diagnosis, alone. The weight of that solitary struggle was almost unbearable to contemplate. The betrayal, if it could even be called that, was indeed born of a fierce, protective love. But then, the letter took a sharp, unexpected turn, veering into a territory Eleanor could never have anticipated, even with her extensive experience in unraveling hidden histories. "There is another secret, Eleanor, one far older, one that has weighed on my conscience, a heavy, silent stone in my heart for decades. It concerns your father, not the man you knew, the man you called father, Arthur Vance, but your biological father." Eleanor's blood ran cold. The carefully ordered world of her identity, already reeling from the shock of her mother's premonition, tilted violently on its axis. Her father, Arthur Vance, the distinguished, quiet academic, the brilliant scholar of ancient languages who had died when she was in her early 20s. He was her father. This was an undeniable, fundamental truth, a bedrock of her life. She had always known this. How could this be? Arthur was a kind, good man, Lillian continued, her handwriting growing slightly shakier here, the words perhaps harder to commit to paper. And he loved you fiercely, Eleanor, as if you were truly his own flesh and blood. He cherished you, but he was not your biological father. Your biological father was a man named Samuel Peterson. I met him in London during the war, in the chaotic autumn of 1944, when I was working for the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS. It was a brief, intense, and profoundly passionate affair. He was a brilliant, idealistic young American journalist, reporting from the brutal front lines of the European theater. He was, to my profound regret, married, Eleanor. And I was young, naive, caught in the terrifying, exhilarating maelstrom of wartime London, a time of unprecedented emotional intensity and fleeting connections. I learned I was pregnant with you weeks after he had already been deployed to the Pacific Theater. He was killed in action, Eleanor, in the desperate final months of the war, before I could ever tell him about you, about the life we had created. Eleanor stared at the words, her mind struggling to process the staggering revelation. Samuel Peterson, not Arthur Vance, not the man she had known, the man whose name she bore, the man who had shaped her intellect and her character. Her entire life, her identity, the foundation of her family history, the very essence of her lineage, suddenly felt like a meticulously constructed illusion, a beautiful but elaborate deception. The echo of absence that had defined her relationship with Lillian was now filled with the profound, disorienting void of an unknown, heroic father she had never known existed. Lillian went on to explain her agonizing return to America after the war, her deep shame, her overwhelming fear of scandal in a conservative post-war society. The prospect of being an unwed mother, of bringing shame upon her own strict, traditional family, had been terrifying. It was then, in her darkest hour of desperation and uncertainty, that she met Arthur Vance. He was a kind, lonely professor at a small New England college, a man of quiet integrity and immense compassion. He offered her stability, a name for her child, and most importantly, unconditional love and acceptance. He knew the truth from the very start. He had chosen, with an almost saintly generosity, to raise Eleanor as his own, a profound secret kept in the deepest, most sacred chambers of their family for decades. Arthur was your true father, Eleanor, in every sense that truly matters, Lillian insisted again, in the letter, her script regaining some of its usual strength, as if to underscore the unwavering truth of her conviction. He raised you, loved you, guided you, nurtured your brilliant mind. He was the constant, unwavering presence in your life. But I felt, as I faced my own mortality, that you deserved to know the full truth of your origins, that a part of you, a part of your essence, your intellect, your passion for discovery, came from a different man, a man who died a hero, never knowing he had a daughter. I leave you with this truth. Eleanor, not to diminish Arthur's memory, but to complete yours. Lillian then mentioned a hidden box containing a few cherished mementos of Samuel Peterson, a small tarnished silver locket, a singled faded photograph, and a collection of his wartime letters addressed to his wife. You will find it behind the loose brick in the fireplace, in the drawing room, the letter instructed, her precision as sharp as ever, even in her final moments. I kept them there, a secret tribute to a life unlived, a love unspoken, a ghost of a past that only I knew. Now it is yours. Eleanor's hands trembled violently, the delicate paper of the aerogram crinkling under her grip. The unsent legacy, the hidden truth. Her mother, in her final act of love and courage, had unveiled the deepest, most carefully guarded secret of her life, revealing a hidden father, a clandestine wartime romance, and the profound, immeasurable choice her stepfather Arthur had made. The carefully constructed world of Eleanor Vance, her stable, academic, predictable universe, was unraveling, thread by unraveling thread, piece by painful, astonishing piece. And she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone even as it ignited a new fierce curiosity, that the drawing room fireplace held the next clue to this astonishing, decades-old mystery, waiting to redefine everything she thought she knew. The truths unveiled were not just about the past. They were about the very fabric of her being. Chapter 3. Echoes in the Fireplace. Driven by a force she couldn't name, a combination of grief, profound shock, and an almost insatiable academic curiosity, Eleanor found herself walking, almost blindly, towards the drawing room fireplace. Her steps were heavy, her mind still reeling, a turbulent kaleidoscope of images and revelations swirling within her. The elegant room, usually a bastion of quiet formality, now seemed to hold the spectral presence of a secret past, a silent, poignant wartime romance playing out against a backdrop of global conflict and profound personal sacrifice. The fireplace itself was a magnificent, imposing structure of polished marble, a testament to Victorian grandeur. Eleanor's fingers, still trembling from the shock of the letter, sought the loose brick Lillian had so precisely described. It was a subtle imperfection, a faint line where the mortar had crumbled slightly, an almost invisible fissure in the flawless facade. With a gentle push, the brick slid inward with a soft, almost imperceptible grating sound, revealing a small, shallow cavity within the thick, cold stone. The space was no larger than her hand, clearly designed for careful concealment. Inside, nestled within the dim, dust-laden confines of the hidden space, lay a small wooden box. It was unassuming, plain, crafted from simple, unadorned oak, yet it radiated the palpable weight of untold history, of decades of carefully guarded secrets. Eleanor lifted it out, her fingers tracing the smooth, aged wood. Feeling the faint warmth that seemed to emanate from its depths, a ghost of Lillian's touch, she placed the box on the polished marble mantelpiece, its dark surface reflecting the muted light of the sunroom. With a deep, steadying breath, she opened the lid. Inside lay the promised mementos, resting on a bed of faded, brittle tissue paper. A small, tarnished silver locket, a single, exquisitely faded photograph, and a thick, neatly bound bundle of letters tied with a simple, frayed blue ribbon. Eleanor picked up the photograph first. It was a black and white portrait of a young man in military uniform, his eyes gazing directly into the lens. He was strikingly handsome, with dark, intense eyes that seemed to hold both idealism and a profound weariness, and a faint, almost shy smile that barely touched his lips. His posture was proud, yet there was a subtle vulnerability about him, a quiet intensity. His gaze held a fierce intelligence, a palpable earnestness, and a quiet idealism that resonated deep within Eleanor's own soul. She stared at the face, searching for a trace of herself, a hint of recognition, a familiar curve or line. And there it was, the curve of his lips, the slight tilt of his head when lost in thought, the directness of his gaze, traits she had always attributed to her mother, or perhaps to the beloved Arthur. Now they belonged to Samuel Peterson, her biological father, the man who had unknowingly contributed half of her genetic makeup. Next, the locket. It was simple, unadorned, clearly a memento of a private nature, perhaps a token of love exchanged in haste. Eleanor fumbled with the delicate clasp, her fingers awkward with emotion. It sprang open with a soft, metallic click, revealing two tiny, perfectly preserved photographs, protected beneath a thin layer of celluloid. On one side, a younger Lillian, almost unrecognizable in her youthful radiance, her hair pulled back in a practical wartime style, a faint, hopeful smile gracing her lips. On the other, the same young man from the larger photograph, Samuel Peterson, his gaze mirroring Lillian's. They looked at each other from within the locket, frozen in a timeless moment of youthful love, a silent testament to a secret shared, a connection forged in the crucible of war. Finally, the letters. Eleanor untied the frayed blue ribbon, her fingers brushing against the fragile, crackling paper. The distinct smell of old paper, a faint hint of tobacco, and something else, something subtly sweet, like old perfume, filled the air. They were addressed clearly and concisely, to my dearest Eleanor, not her, but Samuel's wife, the woman who had waited for him, who had mourned him without ever knowing about the secret daughter he had left behind. The handwriting was bold, decisive, yet filled with an underlying tenderness, a journalist's clear hand tempered by a lover's devotion. She began to read, her heart aching with a profound, almost unbearable empathy for the woman who had lost her husband, for the love that had been tragically cut short by the indifferent hand of war. The letters detailed Samuel's experiences as a war correspondent, the grim, unvarnished realities of the front lines, the relentless bombardments, the camaraderie of his fellow journalists forged in shared danger, his incisive observations on the unfolding chaos and human cost of war. He wrote with a reporter's eye for detail, but also with a poet's sensitivity, capturing the beauty amidst the destruction. But interspersed with these searing accounts of conflict were poignant, almost desperate expressions of love for his wife, his overwhelming longing for home, his fervent hopes for a future that would, tragically, never come to pass. He wrote of the stark, unexpected beauty of the English countryside, the resilience of the British people, the quiet kindness of strangers, and then, in one fleeting passage, almost buried amidst reports of troop movements and diplomatic maneuvers, a brief enigmatic mention of the brilliant, fierce young woman from the OSS with eyes that saw everything. Lillian, her mother. It was a single, discreet reference, yet it spoke volumes, a silent acknowledgement of the powerful, secret connection they had shared. Eleanor felt a profound, almost visceral sense of connection to this man she had never known. She saw his idealism, his unwavering courage in the face of danger, his deep capacity for love and intellectual curiosity. She saw with startling clarity how many of her own innate traits, her piercing intellect, her drive to uncover hidden narratives, her idealism, her subtle reserve, were reflections of this man. It was as if a missing piece of her own identity, a quiet echo in her soul she had never fully understood, had finally found its source, a root extending further back than she had ever imagined. She reread Lillian's letter, then Samuel's letters, then Lillian's again, absorbing every detail, every nuance of her mother's painful confession. The bravery of her mother, choosing to love, to survive, to protect, even if it meant carrying a lifetime of profound secrets. The immense generosity of Arthur Vance, the quiet, noble man who had accepted a child not his own and had loved her unconditionally. raising her with a devotion that transcended biology. The discovery was not just about a biological father, it was about understanding the complex, often heartbreaking, tapestry of her own family history, a tapestry woven with threads of wartime sacrifice, hidden love, profound unspoken choices, and incredible resilience. The ghost of London, of a passionate wartime romance, of a life tragically cut short, had finally emerged from the shadows, bringing with it not just a new truth, but a deeper, more complete understanding of who Eleanor Vance truly was. The Unsent legacy had not just revealed a secret, it had redefined her entire sense of self, stretching the boundaries of her family history far beyond anything she had ever imagined. And the next step, she knew, was to acknowledge this new truth, to honor all the parents, the biological and the chosen, who had shaped her life, and to find a way to integrate this monumental revelation into the living narrative of her present. The echoes in the fireplace had become living voices, speaking of profound love and enduring sacrifice. Chapter 4: The Art of Integration. The seismic revelation of Samuel Peterson's existence, and more importantly, of Lillian's decades-long secret, initiated a profound period of introspection for Eleanor. It wasn't a destructive force splintering her identity, but rather a transformative one, adding layers of meaning and depth to her understanding of herself and her lineage. The initial shock gave way to a quiet, almost reverent contemplation. Her first and most insistent thought, after the initial storm of emotion, was for Arthur, her father, the man who had raised her, educated her, nurtured her passions, and loved her with an unwavering devotion that spanned her entire conscious life. The generosity of his spirit, the boundless depth of his love, now seemed even more extraordinary in light of Lillian's confession. To embrace a child not his own, to accept such a profound secret, and to commit to a lifetime of unconditional parenting, it was an act of quiet heroism that brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. She felt a renewed, aching wave of tenderness and gratitude for him. He was, and would always be, her father in every sense that truly mattered, the architect of her intellect and the foundation of her values. But the knowledge of Samuel Peterson added a new, poignant layer to her understanding of Arthur's immense compassion and sacrifice. It didn't diminish his love, it amplified it. Eleanor knew, with an immediate clarity, that she needed to share this monumental truth with Clara. Her daughter, always her closest confidant, her intellectual sparring partner, and her unwavering support through all her other discoveries, deserved to know the full, complex truth of her own lineage. It was a conversation Eleanor approached with the utmost care and deliberation, just as she had approached telling Clara and Mark's children about the child swap at Lakeside General. She chose a quiet afternoon at Pinecroft, when the house felt still and receptive, and laid out the facts, gently, slowly, allowing Clara time to absorb each astonishing detail. Clara listened with wide, disbelieving eyes, her expression shifting from shock to a dawning, profound understanding. She held Samuel Peterson's letters in her own hands, tracing the bold, confident script, feeling the palpable weight of the past, of a life tragically cut short. She examined the faded photograph, comparing Samuel's features to Eleanor's, to her own, a subtle, almost imperceptible family resemblance emerging. "Grandma Lillian," Clara whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and sorrow. "She carried this alone for so long. It's incredible, the strength, the courage. And Grandpa Arthur, What a truly remarkable, truly noble man he must have been, to do what he did, to love you so completely. He was, Eleanor confirmed, her voice thick with emotion, her eyes distant, remembering Arthur's quiet wisdom. He was truly remarkable. They spent hours talking, poring over the letters, piecing together the fragments of Samuel Peterson's truncated life. They learned of his unwavering passion for justice, his fearless pursuit of truth as a journalist, his quiet sensitivity, his intellectual curiosity. Eleanor found herself tracing the uncanny resemblances to some of her own innate traits. Her incisive intellect, her relentless drive to uncover hidden narratives, her idealism, her subtle, almost protective reserve. It was a comforting, almost validating sensation to realize that qualities she thought were solely her own or inherited from Lillian and Arthur had deeper, more complex roots. It was as if a part of her soul, long unmoored, had finally found an unexpected harbor. The discovery sparked a new, respectful genealogical quest for Eleanor. She wanted to know more about Samuel Peterson's wider life, his family, the wife who had mourned him without ever knowing about the secret daughter he had left behind. It was a delicate, respectful undertaking, driven solely by a desire for knowledge, not intrusion. She used her formidable research skills, delving into old military records, newspaper archives, and genealogical databases. She found distant relatives of Samuel Peterson, tracing branches of his family tree that stretched into unfamiliar territories. But she made no direct contact. She respected the privacy of his original family, who had their own grief, their own narratives, built on a different, complete story. The unsent legacy was Eleanor's alone, a sacred, private truth to be integrated into her own understanding of self, not to disrupt the lives of others. This revelation, however, also prompted a deeper, more nuanced reflection on her relationship with Lillian. The quiet strength, the occasional emotional distance, the fierce independence, the almost rigid control Lillian had maintained over her emotions. Eleanor now understood them in a powerful new light. Lillian had lived a life defined by a profound, decades-long secret. A burden she had carried with immense grace and quiet dignity. The unsent letter was not just a confession. It was her final act of liberation, of profound trust in Eleanor, of a love so deep it transcended societal norms and personal comfort. It was a courageous, self-sacrificing act of love that defined her mother's final moments. Eleanor also reflected on her own lifelong journey, her almost compulsive fascination with hidden histories, with uncovering secrets and bringing light to forgotten truths. Was it a subconscious echo of her own origins, a yearning to understand the unseen threads of her own lineage, a profound, unacknowledged desire to discover the truth of herself? The Chronos lens, the Pinecroft mysteries, the unseen reflection with David, even Mark's connection to Sarah's ghost, they all seemed to point towards a destiny of truth-telling, of being the one who illuminates the hidden corners of human experience, whether historical, familial, or even spiritual. It was as if the universe, in its intricate design, had prepared her, unwittingly, for this final, most personal revelation. The ghost of London, of a passionate wartime romance, of a life tragically cut short, had finally found its voice through Lillian's carefully preserved legacy. Eleanor had acknowledged her unacknowledged parent, not to diminish the profound love and identity she shared with Arthur, but to expand the definition of her family, to honor the complex, beautiful, and often painful tapestry of her origins. The Unsent legacy had not just revealed a secret, it had opened a profound new chapter in Eleanor Vance's life, a deeper, more complete understanding of who she was and who she was always meant to be, a scholar not just of history, but of the human heart, and its boundless capacity for truth, sacrifice, and enduring love. The art of integration was not about forgetting, but about weaving new threads into an already rich tapestry. Chapter 5: The Thread That Connects. The integration of Samuel Peterson's story into Eleanor's life was not a sudden, jarring event, but a gradual, subtle process, like the slow blooming of a night-scented flower, revealing its depths only after the sun has set. It added a profound, resonant layer to her being, a new richness to the tapestry of her identity. Eleanor devoted considerable time to meticulously organizing Samuel's letters and the few mementos. She procured a custom-made archival box, crafted from acid-free materials, and carefully labeled each item. The original aerogram from Lillian, Samuel's wartime letters to his wife, the faded photograph of Samuel in uniform, the small silver locket. She added her own reflective annotations, cross-referencing dates and events, adding context from Lillian's letter. This wasn't for public consumption. It was a sacred, private legacy, a tangible connection to the man who represented half of her biological essence. She often sat with the box open, rereading his letters, finding solace and a strange, comforting sense of familiarity in his words, his observations, his spirit. It was as if she was finally having conversations with a father she had never known, bridging the decades with ink and paper. The act of processing this new information about her biological father also profoundly influenced her rekindled relationship with David Sterling. David, with his scientific mind and deep respect for verifiable facts, yet also his profound sense of wonder and intellectual curiosity, listened to Eleanor's revelations with a unique blend of fascination and empathy. He understood the monumental impact such a discovery could have on one's sense of self, on the very foundation of one's identity. He offered his unwavering support, his quiet, comforting presence, and his own insightful perspectives on the complexities of human lineage, the interplay of genetics and environment, and the subtle, often unseen forces that shape lives. "It's as if, Eleanor," David mused one evening, as they sat by the Pinecroft fireplace, the flames dancing in the hearth. "The universe, in its own grand design, needed to bring you to this point where you could unravel these incredibly deep, intertwined threads. First the overarching historical ones, then the intricate family swaps, the spectral whispers of your son, and finally, your own profound lineage. Perhaps it was always your destiny to be the one who brings these hidden truths to light, to complete these narratives that have remained unfinished for so long." Eleanor found herself agreeing with a quiet certainty. Her entire life, it seemed, had been a meticulous, unwitting preparation for this very role, for being the scholar of silent voices, whether those voices belonged to forgotten historical figures, lost children, or her own departed, complex parents. Every step, every discovery, every unraveling of a secret had led her to this moment of profound self-understanding. The Unsent legacy also deepened her already strong bond with Clara, sharing this intimate, profound truth. The courage Lillian had shown in her final act created an even stronger, more vulnerable connection between mother and daughter. Clara, though still a pragmatist at heart, began to view her grandmother Lillian with a new lens of awe and respect, understanding the immense personal burden she had carried with such grace. It added a layer of profound appreciation for the strength of the women in her family. Eleanor made the conscious decision, deeply considered choice, not to make the existence of Samuel Peterson a public revelation. It was a personal truth, a sacred trust from her mother, a final, intimate gift. The unsent letter was a private legacy, a final act of love that she would honor by keeping it within the intimate circle of their immediate family. She saw it as a testament to Lillian's enduring strength and dignity, not a sensational exposé. The story was hers to process, to integrate, to cherish. However, she did choose to integrate the philosophical and emotional lessons of this profound discovery into her scholarly work. She dedicated a significant portion of her next book, tentatively titled The Scholar of Silent Voices, Echoes of Identity, to a reflective, philosophical exploration of identity, lineage, and the myriad choices that define a family. While she didn't reveal the specific, intimate details of Samuel Peterson, she wrote extensively and eloquently about the profound impact of hidden family histories. The concept of unacknowledged parents or ghost ancestors, and the powerful transformative nature of truth, even when it comes decades later, to bring understanding, healing, and peace. She wove in anecdotes and universal lessons learned from her own journey of discovery, offering profound insights into the human condition without betraying her mother's final confidence. The book became a meditation on the very essence of what makes us who we are. Eleanor realized that the ultimate purpose of the Unsent legacy was not just to reveal a secret, but to bring a deeper, more complete understanding of herself, to allow her to fully embrace all the threads, seen and unseen, known and unknown, that comprised the intricate, beautiful tapestry of her life. It was a final, profound act of love from her mother, a gift of self-knowledge that transcended death, binding them together in a new, more complete way. As years passed, Eleanor continued her quiet, meaningful life at Pinecroft, enriched by her new understanding. The old armchair remained her sanctuary, a place where she felt closest to the past, to the echoes of her son Mark's unique perception, to the enduring spirit of her mother Lillian, and to the quiet, powerful presence of Samuel Peterson. The Unsent legacy had not just given her a biological father, it had given her a profound sense of peace, a deeper understanding of love's boundless capacity, and a renewed, almost spiritual appreciation for the intricate, beautiful, and often mysterious narrative that was her own extraordinary life. The final, unspoken chapter of Lillian's life had found its reader, and in doing so, had illuminated Eleanor's path forward, a path now richly, fully, and deeply understood, woven from all the truths, spoken and unspoken, that had shaped her into the remarkable woman she was always destined to be. The thread that connects, unseen for decades, had finally been found, completing the pattern.